First, I want to tell you about what you ate, maybe. On the plate, there was a little bit of Yuba from Hodo Soy. And the Yuba is when you're making tofu, you heat up the soy milk to a certain temperature, and then you're going to add the coagulant to make the tofu. But Hodo, and you skim off, like when you make milk, you notice you have a skin that you skim off. That's a great delicacy because if you can imagine a big vat of milk, there's not that much that's coming off. But Hodo decided that they had interest in actually just making Yuba. So they have troughs in their place of soy milk that just produce Yuba. And that soy milk's never going to be tofu. And they have 3 kinds, and they're really delicious. And so I thought it would be an easy peasy, nice little bite for you guys. And with that was some freshly ground wasabi that I brought from Japan, grated here, and a little bit of my local soy sauce from Yamaki Jozo, which you can taste afterwards. And then the daikon was simmered in kombu. I did it yesterday at Japanese, and then kombu, kelp. And then the sauce I brought from Japan, I made it in Japan. It's like brown rice miso and white miso, which I don't typically use, but my chef friend in the book, Kanji Nakatani, it was his recipe, and then some dashi and mirin. I didn't use sugar, I used mirin. And a little bit of sesame oil from Takehiro, who's waiting in the wings there. He's like in the corner, you can't see. And then a little bit of he's the best sesame roaster in the world, no question. And I'll tell you about him later. But then a little bit of 7-spice powder from Takehiro. And then the pepper, we use, Kanchan, the chef, used manganji pepper, which is a cross between the Japanese piman and tongarashi, which is Chile. But I found some peppers at Monterey Market that seemed to be pretty and would work, and so that's what we do. We change it, and then on top of it's a little bit of another miso preparation that I brought with some black sesame seeds from Takehiro, and a little bit of okaka, which is in this case I brought freshly shaved katsuobushi. In this case, the katsuobushi, I read about it in the preserving book, the Sakai-san. He sends it to me, and then I ask Kanchan to shave it up on his machine, and it's not just all of the packaged katsuobushi we're getting off course, but let's finish this plate. So all the packaged katsuobushi you get in Japan and in America or in EU, wherever, is made from smoked skipjack tuna. It's a misnomer, the bonito thing, but that's all fine. And then, but the hongare is made from, it's smoked, and then it's fermented and sun-dried in a revolving fashion for about 4 to 6 months, and so the flavor becomes much more elegant. And so, of course, that's what I bring. And then I mixed it with a little bit of the Yamaki soy sauce and put a little divot next to your pepper. The plate is actually, we call it okaka.
Okaka.
Yeah, and some form of katsuobushi that's been flavored with soy sauce. There's different ways, but yeah, it's just. My friend Kanchan, he has a machine to grate to shave, the katsuobushi, and so it's a little bit thicker than when you shave it by hand, which that's the royal you, but nobody actually is doing that. But and so there also were some little powdery things that came off of it, and so not to be wasteful, I just grabbed it out of the bag and put some of the powdery stuff and some of the bigger flake stuff, and so that's what you're tasting.
Yeah,
but yeah, and I like the texture too, and why waste it?
Great.
Yeah, and it also keeps it from, if you do it with like the stuff from the packages in the store, what's going to happen, it's totally fine. I mean, if that's what you have available, and it's fine for dashi, whatever, but what's going to happen, it's going to be clumping up much more.
Yes.
And so in this case, you have succinct, like shaved pieces plus some of the greedy stuff, and so it has that nice texture. And food is not just about taste, it's also about texture.
Absolutely.
Right. So, and I think Takehiro did a very good job of plating it, don't you think? He was my assistant along with Salvador. So, okay. I'm actually here to talk about the book also. I I was here a year and a half ago talking about the third book, Japan the Cookbook. And so we cannot mention this Food Artisans in Japan book without mentioning that one because, well, it's a story about projects, actually. And I think probably you are all project-oriented. I'm hugely project-oriented. So projects start with you brainstorm your idea, you get an idea of how to go forward, and then as you're going forward, it sort of organically takes different courses, and you follow those courses. And in this case, I spent a year traveling and also eventually photographing for it was going to be for the Faiden book, the Japan the Cookbook. And then there was some issues about the photographer, which I will not go into. And so Faiden said, oh, we'll just photograph it for ourselves. And that meant my year and $25,000 later was not. So, of course, I was quite motivated to put that into another book. The good thing is the Japan the Cookbook became a much better book for it. And so the project became two projects, and they were two much better projects. It took some time for me to find Hardy Grant, who I actually all of a sudden remembered, and it was just this, happens this great, as it tends to happen, timing and relationships, and then I asked, and then they said yes, and then it just went along. And also, it's a little bit about, there's a part of Japanese relationships that I try very hard, and I write about it in the introduction in this book, I try very hard to explain to people, and like if I take a film crew, especially U.S., I've only had a few only U.S. film crews, like the Netflix people, but and a few others. But trying to explain the relationship of to ask to go, and then ask for them to spend their time. It's really easy with Japanese TV because all the Japanese want to be on Japanese TV, sure. Or then the next thing is like, oh, I want to come and I'm going to put you in a book, and then that book's going to be 3 years from now. It's a little bit more difficult. And then even American TV, it's like, oh, when can we see it and how can we see it? And one project never has been sold, and it's a great project. I don't know what wasn't sold, but so the responsibility of me asking these people is huge. And so even for me, asking them to come visit them, then they're not in the book. It's felt really, yes, I wanted to recoup the financial part of it, but on the other hand, I also had all this amazing material and I wanted to get into a book. So I was incredibly motivated, and thank God it did. And but this relates a little bit, this responsibility part, and I'm just going to drill into it a little bit because if you ever have any relationships with Japanese, even in business or personal, it's something that's not really spoken about, and nobody probably would necessarily tell you, but it's when you ask for introductions, they're not simply, Japanese will probably happily and nicely give it. I won't, because foreigners act poorly and they take more than they should, and they don't understand how much, like if I ask, I'm like 100% responsible for that bad foreigner, and so I've withheld more and more my introductions. Know the ask, that's all, before you ask. Know what you're asking. So part of the reason why I write about these producers is because, well, I only write about somebody I believe in. And Takehiro is one of the people, and it took a little while to figure out what he was doing. Because there's a lot of gray area these days in Japan, and you're in a very lucky point in the world is starting to get, because of the internet, so much of these artisanal materials are accessible now. 20 years ago, Japanese didn't even have computers. I mean, it was a cell phone was it, and then personal like word processing machines, and even now, if the little artisanal person doesn't have a website, or I have chef friends that don't even use a computer, then but at least somebody's talking about it somewhere, and you can find the information. The problem is, the flip side is that, and then it's the materials are coming to you, and unfortunately, U.S. has like the worst of the Japanese materials, because it's such a big country that there's no clear distributors who are doing artisanal Japanese materials. By happenstance, I got connected with this guy who had a good materials food distributor, purveyor in Australia. And so they have, and I recommended a line of Japanese artisanal ingredients. It's called Fino Foods. So if you ever want to know the Nancy Hachisu vetted list of Japanese materials, go to Fino Foods in Australia, and you can see until they start putting the wrong ones in. But anyway, they have a body of ingredients that I've vetted, and in that vetting process, actually, I learned more about the materials, because I had the responsibility to choose a mirin, for instance. And each time you write a book, like the first time I wrote Japanese farm food, I wrote about katsuobushi. I have katsuobushi, but I actually didn't really quite understand, it's the visualization process. You read about it, it's on the paper, it's flat. And then, of course, you could go and watch a, YouTube video, but I didn't take the time for that. But, or then you go visit, and then you see it, and then the guy tells you, did you know that 90% of the katsuobushi or much more with packaged is all just smoked and not fermented and sun-dried? It's like, oh my God, because we had stopped. I let my husband buy the Japanese materials, and so he had stopped shaving because busy, 3 kids and whatever, and home businesses, and so it's going there is my responsibility. And so, like the salt episode, I know Samin, so I trusted her, and it was the Netflix people arranged the Mosho part. And again, I'm getting into hot water here, but I told them don't go there. It was nothing to do with Samin, but that you don't take the salt off of the seaweed. That's like a crazy idea. They're boiling up the seaweed in this, like a bag of seaweed with the salt water, and you're not really supposed to boil salt water for salt. You're supposed to rake it off salt. But the help them go to my producer people, and of course, by that level with Samin there, they really had they care about the ingredients, and so they did a really good job of showing that, and they did a good job of that weird salt. But these days, and so each time I write a book, I drill down more into the ingredients. In the preserving book, I got some money from the publisher, and I was filming with Fuji Television, and so could go and talk, and not everybody can do that. And in fact, mostly you probably can't, because you can't speak Japanese, and why would they want to have you spend a day with you? So I've decided I'm going to start taking little groups occasionally to do this, but the impact of talking to the person, like the vinegar guy in the preserving book, Io Jozo, and the Japanese pantry guys have, Takehiro's their exporter, but they have Io Jozo vinegar. I think it must be the best vinegar in the world, but it's certainly the best rice vinegar, and it's the only one I use now. But the way he talked about it, and you could see it, and also the low-techness of it. I also went to a miso company once for writing a pamphlet for the Miso Association, and the loudness and the sound and the cacophony, and it was really hot, and and it was like the speed up process is like, miso is this beautiful thing that just sleeps in these hopefully cedar barrels for a year and a half. It's the most beautiful, wonderful thing. And then this other angry miso happening is like the two of them, which one do you want to, we can choose, right? I think we all have, I'd rather buy a good miso than another shirt or something, But so the talking to the producers is something that's really important to me because I feel like they're the treasures of Japan, and there's so many people that don't even recognize all the layers that makes this incredible producer. Like, why was it so impactful when I visited Io Jozo, the vinegar maker, is because Akihiro, who's the son who's taking over, he talked about it in such a way that you knew how much he cared. And then you could see the sleeping vinegars, and you could see they had these bottles with a certain amount of rice showing how much rice actually went into the vinegar. And then he talked about how his grandfather had gone around to the local people and convinced the little rice farmers in the local area to change over to organic, which was 50 years ago. This is like totally unheard of. It's like a miracle. And not many people could listen to this and understand the miracle of it. But my husband's an organic farmer, and I know how little organic farming is happening. And so it's just like you just want to, and everything's made in-house. And so it's just like that personal connection. And I sit at my little school or my house, and I'm just doing my computer and my emails and my writing, and it's kind of like a way of connecting to talk to these people. And it's I grew up in the Bay Area. I'm not a farm girl, but the ability to connect with somebody who's making something the same way for, could it be 100 years, or was it 200 years, or this same technique for making miso, it was several hundreds, if not close to 1,000 years, And so this is something that, as a Bay Area person who grew up in the 60s and 70s, this is, and all the turmoil, that solidity of that, just like it's like this big, huge tree trunk in your life. And that's why I support them, because there's so many of New Japan, just, in it for the money. And you're getting, I see it, where there's a lot of products are coming in. There's the Kishibori Shoyu, if you've ever seen this. It's been here for like 10 or 15 years. It's like this super mid-range soy sauce that they're selling as expensively, because it's packaged well, more expensive, 30% more expensive than our local soy sauce, which is organic, cedar barrel aged, Japanese soybeans. And it's this other one, which is 30% more expensive, is coolly packaged. And they say it's artisanal, and it's made with Chinese beans that are non-organic. So that's the lowest of the lowest of the lowest price. But it's in a cedar barrel. So the one great thing about Google is that, now you can I can't read Japanese, some, but not I can't read a whole website. But I translate it through the Google Translate, and I can read the Romaji, but you can vet these things and see this loosey-goosey type of artisanal means 0, or traditionally made, also 0. Then there's these these marketing companies are now making these Japanese products, and they're making this story. And in fact, these people aren't making the product. They're not. And I know people who are carrying them, and I can't say the name. But they've got this story, and it sounds cool, and the chefs don't have enough time or, impetus to go check it out. But it's really easily foundable. If it doesn't say something on the website in Japanese, if it doesn't say it's Japanese beans, or if it doesn't say it's cedar barrel, if it doesn't say it's organic, it's 100% not. So what they don't say, if you can say traditional, artisanal. So it's actually, I find it very fascinating to look into these things, and I actually sort of hate these people, because I grew up in a very liberal family in the 60s, and my parents, honesty was the most important thing. So this kind of tricking of Americans, or tricking of people in the EU, these so-called artisanal materials, I think it's just hateful. And so that's why I say out about it. And there's also this thing of, and it's just, just seems so anathema, or if that's whatever the word is, of what Japan was always about. And so, and that's why I support these artisans who do it so honestly, so, as it was before, and they also have really cool packaging. So, anyway, the Food Artisans of Japan book is about artisans a lot, and then also 7 chefs. 2 of them are represent 60 out of 125 recipes or so, and they're Japanese stuff that I did today, and then the other 7 are like French Japanese or Italian Japanese, and they're just, I was going to put them in the back of the Fiden book as like new wave recipes, and but they ended up in this book, and they're all people that speak to me because they have good souls and hearts, and so they were not Namae-san in L'Effervescence in Tokyo. He's got two Michelin stars, but anyway, they just are people that I thought should be introduced, and but mostly it's about the artisans too, and the products. And we're going to take some questions. Just quickly tell this quick story about Takehiro. This sort of, I met him at Fancy Food. I was helping out the soy sauce people, and a few years ago, and I was like, we have sesame seeds in our organic local sesame seeds, and you pop them on the pan, which means you're roasting them yourself like you would coffee beans. I'm sure you all roast your own coffee beans, right? And so it just seemed like that's was always what we did, right? I didn't know anything else. And then the stuff in the stores was these weird irigoma, like they packaged in some factory that they were pre-roasted. I just totally did not understand this idea. It was something out of my life. Then came Takehiro sitting next to our booth, and he had these fancy sesames, and I loved the white sesame oil, and you can taste it after. Friggin' believable. But I didn't. I thought, oh, I don't need that fancy sesame, and I'm sure it's really expensive. He gives it to me, so I love him. And so and he was also super quiet, which he really is not. But and I was like, who is that weird gaijin lady that keeps coming over and talking to me? And I don't think he quite understood that I lived in Japan, even though I told him. And I think maybe he went back and Googled me and figured out, oh, maybe I should talk to her, because I had a footprint. And then he sent me some products. And actually, we end up traveling to the same places quite a bit. And also, today, the soy sauce, the daughter of the soy sauce company, Yamaki Jozo, and there's soy sauce and miso out there, really benchmark stuff. She was supposed to come, but her dad died about a month ago, and so she's coming today. And I'm not going to cry. But he was a really special person. But the sons and daughters of that company and Takehiro's company, he's the son, obviously. There are some companies that the sons and daughters are not carrying on the same level of dedication that their parents were. But that's not true for him and for the soy sauce people. And that's why I support them, and they support me by helping out. And so very special person. If you have any questions for him too.
It seems like you're kind of grappling with this need to kind of elevate the presence of these artisanal farmers in Japan, and with like the growing demand in the US for like Japanese cultural cuisine, but like we obviously have some level of illiteracy to like what is actually good, and it's hard, like you said. Have you considered, or have you thought about advocating for bringing those kind of cultural traditions into people in like California who want to grow, say, like organic soybeans for soy sauce, or rice, or sour plums, or those kind of things, as a way to kind of like almost bring it over, so then there's like a domestic culture that exists?
Yeah, I mean, that's so beyond me, because I'm based in Japan. And what I can do is I can and thank you for saying that, because one of the things, there's this phenomenon in Japan, we've heard of it, of the reverse exportation. So one of the things about you guys being interested in these materials and then me writing about it or somebody else talking about it or they're selling it, then it does come back to Japan. And so it does mean a lot that you guys are receptive of it. And I'm not trying to be negative, say, the U.S., like Japanese Pantry has some good things, and NA Sales might, and there's some, the Whole Foods has my local soy sauces repackaged as Nama Shoyu. But the soy sauce and miso company is motivated for it is coming, but there's also some kind of tricky stuff coming too. And but it comes back to Japan, like all this interest. I'm sure the Netflix thing came back to Japan, and I think that Yamaroko, the shoyu guy, is getting a lot of interest in his soy sauce, and he's a super sweet guy, and he should, But so it's as far as the U.S. does a much better job of, because of this huge Japanese American population. I guess it's not huge, but there's a really significant up the coast. And so there is ume and there is roots already here. Whereas in Australia, I see like just really weird misos and not really. And then chefs are saying, oh, the Yamaka miso doesn't taste like Australian miso. It's like, what the fuck? Excuse me. I'm like, what? This is like benchmark miso, so it doesn't taste like that sour, non-koji fermented lacto miso. Really? Or the spelt miso or the peanut miso. It's insane. So that's what I worry about is the food. So U.S., California, Washington, Seattle has a great possibility. And soybeans are really hard to grow. I'm just going to tell you that, though. But it's out of my wheelhouse. You look on my site. I'm going to start doing some tours. You can come on over.
Hi there. Thank
Hi.
you for coming. So I'm Japanese American. My parents are very Japanese, and I was born and raised in California. And one of the things that people ask me pretty often is, what do you consider the most iconically Japanese dish? And of course, a lot of the dishes that people understand and know now are very Western influenced.
They're also restaurant food, typically.
Yeah, and I go into a whole spiel, and I'm pretty opinionated about this, but I wanted to get your thoughts on what you think is the most uniquely iconic Japanese dish.
I couldn't put my finger on one, but Chris asked me earlier about nabe, which I guess he was calling hot pot. We have to change this to nabe, please. But hot pot or whatever pot, one pot, The nabe is, it's the clay, it's actually diaphysical earth pot that you just put a piece of kombu in, you put some water in, and then you start throwing the negi and the various the vegetables from the winter and some tofu and some shiitake, and then if you want to have protein, you add some chicken or meat or fish, and it's like the easiest, quickest family dish. I actually kind of got sick of it, so I don't really want to eat it. But and then you have a bowl of rice on the side, or you can put the rice in afterwards, or you can do noodles. It's the one dish that my son makes it for all when he and his friends get together because it's cheap, easy, feeds a lot of people, and quick. So, but otherwise, the most iconic Japanese food is rice and aemono. I feel like just the various vegetable treatments, but that's me,
What is your go-to comfort Japanese dish?
I think my go-to comfort, Western dishes are my go-to comfort because that's what I grew up with. But otherwise, actually like miso soup, I cook I just cook what I want to cook, and actually, a lot of tofu. Tofu is like this. We have really beautiful tofu that's like custard, and then there's different fried tofus that are all like Yamaki makes them, the soy sauce people, and they're like instant foods. You just saute them up and put some chopped scallions and ginger and katsuobushi and a little soy sauce, and it's like a little, it's like there's a lot of instant foods that you don't have to buy at 7-Eleven. They're real food,
What is your favorite excerpt or recipe from your book, Food Artisans of Japan?
Oh, ah, that's hard. It'd have to be mostly things from the. I mean, I love all of the Italian Japanese and the French Japanese, but we're going to be doing this soy milk gratin. There's a gratin dish in Kanchan's the Kanji Nakatani section, and but I brought this cool potato flour that I talk about in the beginning of the book from Iwate, and so we're making this gratin with the Hodo soy milk, and I'm going to add some dashi to it. So actually, my favorite food is sashimi, and so it's not really like cooking, you know. So probably my favorite page would be the sashimi page, because that's actually the reason why I went to Japan was because I love sushi, and I decided I was going to learn Japanese and then come back to grad school and go to get a law JD and a master's in East Asian studies. But, yeah.
One recipe that you recommend everyone try from your book?
You ask these questions. Oh my God. You know the little zensai plates in the beginning of the Kanji Nakatani section. There's like I Instagram about these a lot because that's my favorite little plate to eat, and I guess I have a super boring Instagram feed. It only has those plates, but or my book cover. But tamago tofu. I love that. It's easy. It's just like it's an egg custard. You know, it's egg. It's like a chawamushi, but like cuttable. You know, so it's egg with dashi, and then you put some mushroom and boiled greens, blanched greens, and you can put crab or not crab or whatever, and you cut it, and it's one of our favorite dishes at Soba Ra, and it's actually in one of those books, the first books. Maybe Japanese farm food. I think Andrew told me the recipe. But all of those little bites are delicious and easy. And good to have in your repertoire. And also the great thing about Japanese food is like it's meant to be eaten any meal, breakfast, lunch, or dinner, you know, and you can bring it out again and again, which is, you know, kind of get sick of it, but that is true. There's no line between the meals.
Thank you so much for coming today and sharing your knowledge with us, and thank you all for the gifts and the food, and we'll give you one round of applause.